If you spend enough time around money, you notice a pattern that has almost nothing to do with arithmetic and almost everything to do with emotion. Fear sells faster than facts. Rumors spread faster than balance sheets. A dramatic claim about the banking system can travel around the country before one careful person has the time to ask whether any of it is actually true. That is not a small problem. It is one of the reasons ordinary people make bad decisions with serious money. They do not lose because they lacked intelligence. They lose because they reacted to urgency before they examined reality. I have watched this cycle for years. A new rumor appears. The government is changing some threshold. A global banking rule has quietly passed. A estate is somehow outside the Federal Reserve. A mint suspension proves the paper market is dead. A new system is coming. A transition is already underway. Every claim carries the same emotional structure. You are late, you are vulnerable, they are hiding something. AT now. That structure is incredibly powerful because it does not ask you to think. It asks you to feel. And once people begin making financial decisions from fear, they stop demanding precision. That is where trouble starts. The material you gave me has real viral potential for exactly that reason. It runs through a series of alarming financial claims, then answers them one by one, shifting the audience from anxiety to apparent clarity. The strongest part of it is not any one claim. It is the rhythm of rumor, explanation, and emotional release. Fay-file site Fay-turn 5 file 5 Fay L15, L39 Fay-file site Fay-turn 5 file 1 Fay L28, L60 Fay. That is the part worth preserving. But I would tell the story differently. I would not frame it as a stream of answers to internet questions. I would frame it as a lesson in how to think when money rumors begin spreading faster than evidence. Because that is what really matters. A person who knows how to think through panic is worth more than a person who merely memorizes the panic of the week. Let us begin with something simple: the $10,000 cash withdrawal reporting threshold. The original source says there is no confirmed U.S. law, at least in the framing of the piece, that has officially lowered the long-standing $10,000 cash reporting rule, even though there are rumors and proposals circulating about possible future changes. It also emphasizes that taking cash out of your account is not illegal, just because it may create a report or paper trail. Fay-file site Fay-turn 5 file 5 Fay L15 L39 Fay. That is a useful starting point. Not because the threshold itself is the most important subject in the world, but because it teaches a much bigger lesson. People hear about a possible change in financial reporting and immediately translate it into confiscation, prohibition, or criminalization. That is an enormous leap. In finance, bad thinking often begins with category errors. A reporting threshold is not the same thing as a ban. Paper trail is not the same thing as criminal suspicion. Administrative friction is not the same thing as losing legal access to your own funds. You would be amazed how many people become frightened simply because a transaction is visible. Visibility makes them uncomfortable, so they start imagining prohibition. That is irrational. The existence of reporting rules does not mean ordinary legal activity has become illegal. It means the system records more than people wish it did. Those are different things. A rational adult should know the difference. And yet the rumor machine thrives because the rumor machine is not trying to help people distinguish categories. It is trying to collapse them. If people believe reporting means danger, then they are easy to manipulate. If they believe every policy discussion means a law has already passed, then they are easy to manipulate. If they believe uncertainty itself is evidence of conspiracy, then they are very easy to manipulate. That is why good financial judgment begins with a simple discipline. Ask what exactly happened. Then ask what did not happen. Then ask what people are smuggling into the story emotionally. That is the process. Without that process, every alarming headline becomes a potential financial injury. No, let us move to the next claim because it reveals the same weakness in a slightly more sophisticated costume: Basel III and gold rehypothecation. The source tackles this directly and says no such rule exists that bans banks from rehypothecating gold or silver. It distinguishes between actual Basel liquidity rules affecting unallocated or paper gold and the much more dramatic online claim that gold and silver rehypothecation has somehow been outlawed everywhere. The source says those are not the same thing. File cite Fayturn 5 file 0 Fal 41 L70 Fay. Exactly. This is how rumor inflation works. A real technical adjustment occurs. Someone half understands it. Someone else converts that half understood change into a sweeping civilizational claim. Then the audience hears the dramatic version and never bothers to separate the original rule from the embellished interpretation. That is dangerous, because finance is full of technical language that sounds dramatic to non-specialists. Rehypothecation, liquidity coverage, net stable funding, Tier 1 treatment, unallocated metal, collateral usage. These are not casual words. They live in a technical landscape. When people pluck one of those words out of context and turn it into a viral prophecy, they are usually not clarifying the world. They are monetizing confusion. The source is right to say that if there had truly been a sweeping ban of the sort rumor merchants describe, it would not be living only inside internet commentary. It would be explicit in actual regulatory materials and widely covered file site. Fayturn 5, file 0 Fal 52, L60 Fay, that is a principle I trust. If a rule is truly transformative, you should be able to find it in serious places, not merely in excited interpretations of serious places. And this points to a deeper weakness in how many people consume financial information. They do not really want the truth. They want the truth-shaped object that validates their existing suspicion. That is a very different appetite. A suspicious person can hear a rumor like this and feel wiser for believing it. He thinks he has glimpsed what the public missed, but often what he has really done is confuse insider, sounding language with genuine understanding. That happens constantly in markets. A person learns enough jargon to feel superior and not nearly enough substance to protect himself. I have seen fortunes lost that way. The saddest part is that the original source does contain one worthwhile observation beneath the rumor cleanup. It says that the popularity of such claims tells you something about trust. People increasingly want real ownership, real clarity, and something less abstract than paper claims. File cite Fayturn 5, file 1 Fal 13, L23 Fay. That is a useful observation, but a useful observation can still be wrapped in excess emotion. The desire for clarity is rational. The leap from that desire to exaggerated conclusions is not. A person may prefer direct ownership of certain assets. Fine, but preference is not proof. Distrust is not documentation. And anxiety is not analysis. Those are distinctions more investors need to learn. Now consider the North Dakota myth, because this one is especially interesting. The source says North Dakota is absolutely inside the Federal Reserve System and explains that confusion arises because the state has the uniquely state-owned Bank of North Dakota, and because some banks there may be state-chartered without being Federal Reserve member banks. But the source emphasizes that none of this means the state itself sits outside the Fed's payment rails, clearing systems, or district structure. File cite Fayturn, 5 file 1 Fay L28, L57 Fay. That is another good example of how people confuse uniqueness with exemption. North Dakota is unusual. It is not exempt. That difference matters, A lot of modern financial myth-making depends on exactly this misunderstanding. If one piece of a system is unusual, people start imagining it has escaped the whole system. That is childish thinking. A local exception in structure is not the same thing as a total exemption from national architecture. Again, the audience often wants the dramatic version because it is emotionally satisfying. The dramatic version says there is a secret crack in the wall. The boring version says the wall is still there, but one brick has a different color. The internet is not built to reward the boring version. Markets do not care about what the internet rewards. That is why I have always thought financial maturity requires a tolerance for anticlimax. The truth is often anticlimactic. The truth often says something is narrower than it seemed, slower than it seemed, or less revolutionary than it seemed. The immature mind finds that disappointing. The mature mind finds it useful. And usefulness is what counts. Because money is not preserved by exciting stories, it is preserved by correct distinctions. This is also why I dislike the general style of commentary that begins with a rumor, partially corrects it, and then turns immediately to a larger civilizational warning. That move is all over your source. A myth gets examined. The myth is dismissed in literal form. Then the emotional energy gets redirected into a broader narrative that the system is breaking anyway, that trust is collapsing anyway, that physical ownership is the answer anyway. Fay file site Fay turn 5 file 1 Fay L54 L64 Fay file site Fay turn 5 file 2 Fay L79 L102 Fay. Now, a broader narrative can sometimes be right. Markets can be fragile, institutions can be overtrusted. Paper claims can create distortions. Physical supply constraints can matter, all true in their proper place. But a person should notice the rhetorical move. The literal rumor may be false, yet the emotional momentum is preserved and channeled into a related conclusion. That is a very effective persuasion technique. It is also exactly the kind of thing a careful investor should learn to spot. Because if you do not spot the technique, you may think you are being led by evidence when in fact you are being led by mood. And mood is a terrible portfolio manager. Now let us turn to the strongest and most interesting section of the source. The U.S. Mint suspension of silver numismatic products. This part is more serious because it involves a real operational signal rather than a pure rumor. The source says the Mint suspended silver numismatic products due to extreme price volatility and pricing review issues, and then interprets that suspension as evidence that physical silver supply is under strain relative to paper, market pricing, and that price discovery may be shifting toward the physical market. Fay file site Fay turn 5 file 1 Fay L70 L90 Fay file site Fay turn 5 file 2 Fay L47 L88A. That is a much more interesting claim. Not because every conclusion drawn from it is automatically correct, but because here we have an actual real-world event being used as a signal rather than a pure fabricated rumor being passed around as fact. That difference matters. A mature investor should always distinguish between a fabricated event and a real event with debatable interpretation. The first deserves dismissal. The second deserves examination. And the examination here is not trivial. When a major mint suspends certain products because pricing becomes unstable or supply becomes difficult at prevailing terms, that does suggest friction between quoted price and physical product reality. Friction matters. Friction is one of the places where theory collides with the world. A futures curve may imply one thing, a derivatives market may imply another. A quoted spot price may imply another. Then the actual buyer of actual metal discovers that at the quoted number the product is not easily obtained. That gap is information. Now, does that automatically prove the entire paper market is fiction? Not necessarily. Does it automatically prove a new monetary order is upon us? Not necessarily. Does it deserve attention? Absolutely. That is how I would frame it. Attention without hysteria. Attention without propaganda. Attention without turning every supply squeeze into proof that the old world ended this morning. Because once again, the temperament matters as much as the interpretation. The source builds this into a larger argument that physical demand, shrinking inventories, and stress in the paper to physical relationship are forcing better price discovery and may eventually lead the paper market to follow. Fay file site Fin 5 file 2 Fay A51 L88 Fay maybe. Maybe not on the timetable the excitable crowd wants. But that is at least a hypothesis tied to a real event. That is better than rumor. And if I were extracting the most valuable lesson from the entire piece, it would not be go buy metal because the system is ending. That is too crude. The more valuable lesson is this. You must learn to separate three very different categories. First, false claims that collapse under inspection. Second, true events that are being exaggerated. Third, true events that genuinely reveal structural stress. Most people are terrible at this separation. They treat the first category as if it were urgent truth. They treat the second category as if it were total proof. They treat the third category with the same emotional style as the first two, which means they often become either too gullible or too dismissive. Neither is intelligent. The intelligent person asks, what type of information is this? Not merely, does it make me nervous? That is why I think the most useful way to convert your source into a Buffett-style story is to move away from gold and silver evangelism and toward decision quality. What ruins people financially is not that they failed to hear enough dramatic warnings. It is that they could not distinguish signal from noise. They could not tell a discussion from a law. They could not tell a technical Basel rule from a viral fantasy about system-wide rehypothecation bans. Fay file site Fay 5 file 0 Fay L43 L67 Fay. They could not tell a unique state-owned bank from exemption from the Federal Reserve System. Fay file site Fay 5 file 1 Fay L34 L57 Fay. They could not tell a mint suspension from immediate proof that every paper market mechanism had collapsed. Fay file site Fay 5 file 2 Fay L79 L102 Fay. That is where the damage begins, because once you cannot distinguish those things, you become highly governable by fear. And fear is expensive. Fear will make you buy the wrong thing at the wrong time. Fear will make you liquidate productive assets too early. Fear will make you overconcentrate in something you barely understand. Fear will make you mistake dramatic language for prudence. I have always thought that one of the great advantages in investing is emotional sobriety, not because emotion disappears, it never does, but because the person who can slow down when everybody else is rushing has a tremendous edge. He can ask basic questions while others are sharing headlines. He can separate known facts from narrative glue. He can inspect the plumbing before assuming the house is on fire. That is worth an enormous amount. Now, I do not want to go too far in the other direction. Skepticism is not the same as complacency. A person should understand that systems can become stressed. He should know that paper claims and physical constraints can diverge. He should know that institutions have incentives. He should know that rules can change. He should know that liquidity matters, custody matters, legal title matters, and concentration matters. None of this is trivial. The answer is not to become a sleepy optimist who trusts every official line. The answer is to become a disciplined evaluator who neither panics nor sleeps. That is the balance. And once you reach that balance, a lot of financial commentary starts looking different. You begin to see that many people in the money world are not selling information at all. They are selling emotional states urgency, outrage, fear vindication. Insider confidence, system collapse. These emotional states are extraordinarily monetizable, especially when the audience is anxious, and audiences are anxious now. That is why content like this spreads. It speaks directly to a public that already suspects the system is opaque and unfair. Sometimes that suspicion is justified, but justified suspicion still needs disciplined thinking. Otherwise, suspicion itself becomes another way to lose money. If I were sitting with a thoughtful retiree or a serious saver, here is what I would tell him. Do not dismiss every rumor automatically. But do not let every rumor rent space in your head either. Build a hierarchy. If a claim is about a law or regulation, demand the exact law or regulation. If a claim is about a banking system exemption, demand the actual operating structure. If a claim is about a market shortage, demand the concrete operational evidence and not just the excited conclusion. That is how adults think with money. Not by being cynical about everything, not by believing everything, by grading evidence. The source itself, without quite saying it this way, gives you the raw material for that discipline. It gives you a rumor about the cash threshold, then says the confirmed law is not there yet. Fay file cite Fay turn, 5 file 5 Fay L15, L35 Fay. It gives you a rumor about Basel III banning rehypothecation, then says no such rule exists, and that people are confusing one thing for another. Fay file cite Fay turn, 5 file 0 Fay L41, L70 Fay. It gives you a claim about North Dakota escaping the Fed, then says the state is fully within the system, even if one institution there is unusual. Fay file cite Fay turn, 5 file 1 Fay L28, L57 Fay. Then it gives you a real event at the Mint and says this one may actually deserve attention because the physical market is telling you something. Fay file cite Fay turn 5 file 1 Fay L70, L90 Fay file cite Fay turn 5 file 2 Fay L51, L88 Fay, that sequence, if handled properly, becomes a lesson in intellectual hygiene. And intellectual hygiene is worth more than most people realize because in markets, one careless belief rarely stays isolated. A person who believes one badly sourced dramatic claim is much more likely to believe the next one. Then the next, then the next. Soon, his entire financial worldview is built on emotionally coherent stories rather than verified relationships. That is a dangerous place to live. You do not need to become a lawyer. You do not need to become a central banker. You do not need to read every regulatory filing, but you do need enough discipline to slow the story down. That is the whole point. Slow the story down. Ask what happened. Ask what did not happen. Ask what is being inferred. Ask what is merely being implied. Ask what evidence would have to exist if the dramatic version were actually true. Those questions alone would save ordinary people an enormous amount of money. And once you have done that work, you may still conclude that you want some assets outside the banking system. Fine, you may still conclude that physical ownership matters in some proportion. Fine. You may still conclude that paper and physical markets do not always tell the same story. Fine. But if you arrive there through examination rather than fear, you have already improved the quality of your decisions. That is all I care about, decision quality. Because the best financial defense is not merely owning the right asset. It is thinking clearly enough that you do not stampede into the wrong one. That is the advantage I would want. That is the habit I would trust. And in a world full of financial rumors, that habit is worth more than any dramatic prediction.